but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. One or two things to talk about this evening. First up, it's liftoff. The country's largest oil field is officially open for drilling. So, is Rishi Sunak right to ignore the net zero backlash and put Britain's prosperity first? That is the topic of my digest. You won't want to miss it. Plus, we'll get the views of my panel this evening. We've brought out the dream team. We've got Christine Hamilton, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larzer. Plus, Suella Braverman delivered a powerful speech about illegal immigration. But do you agree with her that multiculturalism has failed in the UK? Nana Akua, Chris Rose and Joanna Jarju debate that in what will be a fiery clash. And after the Thatcher donor and Tory peer Lord Harris says the Conservatives don't deserve to win the next election, Lee Anderson joins me live in the studio to give his unmissable reaction. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales sparkles as she steps out with children at a special needs play centre. So are the royal family realising that putting her front and centre is a PR winner? Top royal author Angela Levin will be here with expert analysis. We'll bring you a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, and I'll be asking Jim Davidson if broomsticks will fly before J.K. Rowling gets cancelled for her trans views. 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel. I didn't expect to be sat here tonight. I was going to wash my hair and watch Coronation Street. But unless you've been living under a rock or don't have internet access, you'll be aware that GB News presenter Lawrence Fox appeared on the channel last night and made some offensive comments about the journalist Ava Evans. Free speech is everything, but it comes with responsibility. Anything you say or write or broadcast will rightly be exposed to the court of public opinion. I know, I've been there, and I'll be there again. Whether Lawrence should stay on air is not my decision, and Dan's absence tonight is also beyond my control. There is an investigation ongoing, but the comments made by Lawrence, in my view, were sexist, misogynistic, and unusually, in the frenzied climate of the so-called culture wars, have been condemned across the political spectrum, from left and right, and even the Liberal Democrats, wherever they are. GB News has directly apologised to the journalist concerned. Now, from my distant background in stand-up comedy, I learnt a lesson a long time ago, which is that you can joke about anything you like, but when you cross the line, the audience will have you. Their judgment will be felt. It's very regrettable that has happened on GB News, where myself and my colleagues rightly condemn personal ad hominem attacks on other people. Where possible, we seek to play the ball, not the man, or in this case, the woman. We don't always achieve that. Unfortunately, this awful episode plays into the hands of our critics, the people who would love to see the back of GB News. That mustn't happen. This is still a relatively new channel. And yet we're garnering a fast-growing and incredibly loyal audience. We are rewriting the rule book on how current affairs broadcasting is done. And whilst we're here for the many people in this country who feel they do not have a voice, the truth is we're here for everyone. People are coming to us in their numbers across all political colours because they want a different angle, a different approach. And they want debate, they want a diversity of opinion, and they want it done with wit and wisdom. Fiery and good-humoured, but respectful and fair too. That is the GB News way. We didn't have that last night. In the end, a hard lesson has been learnt. We have freedom of speech, but not freedom from the fallout. A lot to get through tonight, including my daily digest. Rishi Sunak says no zero to net zero, opening the biggest untapped oil field in the North Sea. My reaction in 2 minutes. You won't want to miss it. First, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, tributes are pouring in tonight for a much-loved 15-year-old girl with a bright future after she was stabbed to death on her way to school this morning. The emergency services were called to Croydon in South London at about 8:30. An eyewitness described seeing a bus driver and a passerby trying to resuscitate her. Chief Superintendent Andy Britton said a 17-year-old boy has been arrested who was known to the victim.
This is every parent's worst nightmare, and I know the officers who responded this morning, along with our emergency service colleagues, are devastated at the victim's death. This is an emotion I share, and I know people across Croydon will be feeling the same. The victim's family has been informed, and our thoughts are with them at what must be an incredibly difficult time.
Andy Britton. Now, as you've been hearing, this company, GB News, has suspended its presenter, Dan Wootton. It's after offensive comments were made by Lawrence Fox during an interview on this channel last night. He made a series of derogatory remarks about political journalist Ava Evans. Presenter Lawrence Fox has also been suspended with immediate effect and taken off air. In a statement, GB News called the comments totally unacceptable, adding they did not reflect the company's values. GB News has issued a formal apology to Miss Evans and launched a full investigation. The UK's largest untapped oil and gas field, Rosebank in Scotland, has been approved for development. That's despite a row over climate concerns. Regulators say net zero considerations have been taken into account, but Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, says he's disappointed that the project's been given the go-ahead. The UK government, however, has welcomed the decision, saying it'll generate billions for the economy. The United Nations has rejected the Home Secretary's calls for international law on refugees to be changed. In a speech in Washington in the United States yesterday, Suella Braverman suggested the UN 1951 Refugee Convention needed updating. She argued that fearing discrimination for being gay or a woman shouldn't be enough to qualify for international refugee protection. The UK's first drug consumption room, where users can take illegal drugs under medical supervision, has been approved. The facility, planned for Glasgow's East End, is backed by the Scottish Government as a way to tackle the country's debilitating drugs deaths crisis. The £2.3 million pilot will allow users to take their own illegal drugs in a hygienic environment with medical staff on standby for support. And if the weather's howling outside your window, you won't be surprised to learn yellow weather warnings are in place for most of the UK, as forecasters have warned worse conditions are on the way. Storm Agnes is set to make landfall in the UK after already battering the south of Ireland with gale-force winds, causing damage to buildings, trees, coming down as well, and power outages, as well as significant travel disruption. The Met Office has warned Storm Agnes may also lead to an increased risk of flooding in vulnerable or low-lying areas, and strong and disruptive winds are expected to last until tomorrow morning, with the storm at its worst, we're told, in about an hour's time. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
God, it's almost like Rishi Sunak wants to get re-elected. Britain's largest untapped oil field in the North Sea has been approved by the government. The Rosebank oil and gas project was granted consent by the North Sea Transition Authority on Monday, with the potential of up to 500 million barrels of oil. However, environmental activists, including Green Party MP Caroline Lucas, said the decision amounted to a climate crime and that it was morally obscene. No. What is morally obscene is the example of Germany, who have spent years ploughing billions of euros into flaky renewables, which has left them reliant on tyrants like Vladimir Putin to keep the lights on. Misguided green policies in Germany have led to the effective bankrolling of the Kremlin's war machine. Well done, everyone. Meanwhile, over in the United States, why is American inflation so low? Why is their economy going gangbusters? Because they are energy independent, with vast reservoirs of shale gas approved by Barack Obama, of all people. Who'd have thunk it? In this unstable world, it's pure madness to rely on despotic states like Saudi Arabia and Russia for our energy supplies. And whilst I back further investment in renewables, it's time to be honest with the public that green energy is extraordinarily expensive and is ultimately a massive experiment. It's a punt. Don't take my word for it. When invited to invest in new wind farm licences earlier this month, no bids were made by the private sector. 0 bids. That's net zero for you. Plus, how honest are proponents of green energy being with you when they fail to factor in the massive environmental impact of constructing these windmills, these solar panels, and the thousands of miles of cable needed to transport their intermittent energy? Where do you store that energy? And what's the shelf life of a windmill? 15 years if you're lucky. What happens when it's not windy or sunny? It's like people who drive around in electric cars thinking they've saved the planet. What about the energy to make those cars? And the finite precious resources in those batteries, mined in slavery conditions, which are knackered after a few years? And how are those batteries recharged? You guessed it, via fossil fuels. In the end, I think there's a middle way, and what I'm calling smart net zero, or smart zero, in which we pursue energy policies based upon evidence-based science, based upon what we can afford, based upon the needs of our economy, and based upon the support of the public. The cervix-free leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, wants to bet the house on unproven green renewables and tear up oil and gas licences before we're ready, whilst Sunak is offering a more balanced approach. In the end, we probably need a mix of renewables, nuclear, oil and gas. Energy security is national security, which is why, for now, Rishi's right to drill, baby, drill. Reacting to my big opinion, let's speak to author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Lazar. Matthew, what do you think about this?
Well, I don't think that Labour will be ripping up any oil and gas licences. Quite the contrary. They've been very clear. Keir Starmer's made it absolutely clear that although no new licences will be offered under a Labour government, there won't be any ripping up of existing ones, including
why close that door?
That's granted today. Because the North Sea is coming to the end of its life. This is probably the last big one.
Wait a minute. We've just got this oil field with 500 million barrels ready to go.
Which is about 5% of what the country needs. So, yes, the North Sea is important, and it's an important part of the energy mix. You're absolutely right, Mark. We need a mixture of energy sources, and that's why it's a tragedy we haven't built any new nuclear power stations in the last 13 years.
Why is your mate Keir Starmer closing the door on other oil and gas licences? Why set that precedent?
Because we need to draw a line in the sand and make sure that investment is focused on renewables, but oil and gas will still be part of the mix for years to come.
Do you trust these renewables to deliver when they have so spectacularly failed for Germany?
Well, Germany did a stupid thing because it closed its nuclear power stations.
Right, so that proves renewables don't work?
No, it means that renewables need to be part of a mix that includes nuclear. I'm very pro-nuclear power stations. Labour's very pro-nuclear power stations. The trade unions are very pro-nuclear power stations. The Tories haven't built any.
Germany is a test case.
Because of the Lib Dems.
Well, look, let me put this to you, Adam. Germany is a test case for renewables. I see renewables as part of the mix. Apparently, by the way, the UK is very good on green tech. It can make jobs, and I guess it's the future. But you don't bet the house on these flaky energy sources.
Like, would I sell my house if I didn't have anywhere to live once that's gone through. No, I wouldn't. This net zero, or nut zero, as Dan would call it, is based on dodgy modelling, is based on scientists that are heavily funded to get these answers. You know, we are less than 1% of the world's polluters. Nothing that Britain does changes the climate. Even the darling of the left, Tony Blair, admitted that the other week. Now, at the end of the day, I'm no Rishi fan either, but what he's done here is fantastic because it secures our future a little bit more. And it's 4 times greener to domestically produce gas than it is to import it. So these eco-nuts and the Green Party that are saying this is terrible, we're actually going to be less polluting by domestically producing it ourselves.
However, where's your evidence that the modelling is dodgy, like you say?
Well, we see during COVID, the modelling was all over the place.
Sure, that's COVID.
Oh, that
what
was
about
science. That was science.
Yeah, but what about the climate scientists, majority of whom argue there's a direct link between fossil fuel consumption and rising temperatures? I
don't believe there is anything that we as humans are doing that is making the climate change. At the end of the day, you know, if you look back, the graphs are doing this and oscillating. The Earth changes, the sun changes. You know,
Christine changes. Matthew, you're shaking your head. Before I come to Christine,
Absolutely.
she gets the last word because she is the last word. You're shaking your head.
No,
Why?
I think climate change is real. Climate change is happening. I think that those environmental campaigners need to be careful that scare stories don't make don't cry wolf. But we need to change our energy mix. But we need a sensible mix, including oil and gas, but including renewables and nuclear.
Well, I personally think, Christine, that Keir Starmer's had a mare when it comes to this because he initially outlined that he wouldn't be granting any oil and gas licences, and then he said, "Oh, except for the ones that Rishi Sunak's just negotiated."
Well, I think there's two big words here. One is security. We need our own independent energy. We need a mix. Of course, we need a mix. We've got this massive deposit in the North Sea. It is there asking to be taken out. We would be absolutely mad. It's not, what did she call it? Climate crime and morally obscene, Caroline Lucas. That is absurd. We need it. And also, it is the hypocrisy of people who are against this. They are perfectly happy to make all the stuff that we import. China is making all these emissions, making the stuff that we then import. If we make, they're saying that we shouldn't be putting out all these emissions. All we're doing is exporting that moral value abroad, and other people are putting out these climate emissions on our behalf. It is utter hypocrisy. America has shown the way. We should be fracking. We should be opening up getting all the coal out that is there. It is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. We haven't had, this is the first one, is it? Brent's been going since 1975. Producing massive energy for this country.
Briefly,
and
just remember, this deal is going to create billions for HMRC.
And jobs.
And jobs. I think it's 1,700 jobs. This is good for Britain.
Matthew,
Absolutely.
This U-turn on net zero puts Labour under pressure, yes or no?
No, because...
What have you been drinking?
Sadly,
That's
nothing...
not GB News tea.
It's a cola-based beverage, but nothing more exciting in it than that. But no, look, it is difficult for Keir because there's a lot of pressure from the unions because they're good-paying jobs in the North Sea to allow new licences. I think he's got the balance right, which is not to rip up any existing licences, no more uncertainty, but make sure that we have an energy mix that we need for the future.
OK, well, look, this show is all about opinions. What is yours? Drop me a line, mark@gbnews.com. They come straight to my laptop, so drop me a line right now, mark@gbnews.com. Coming up, that was a little heavy-handed. Coming up, what does Lee Anderson make of Thatcher donor Lord Harris claiming the Tories don't deserve to win the next election? The Tory party deputy chairman live in the studio shortly. Sparks will fly, you won't want to miss it. But first in the clash, is Suella Braverman right that multiculturalism has failed in Britain and across Europe? Joanne Jarju, Chris Rhodes and Nana Akua do battle on that next. But do drop me a line, mark@gbnews.com. I'll see you shortly.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Real World with Lee Anderson coming up soon, but first it's time for this. Yes, it's time for the clash, and Home Secretary Suella Braverman was in Washington yesterday giving a speech on migration. And reading the United Nations The Riot Act over their definition of a refugee, which she argued should be narrower and not granted to those fleeing their home country because they were gay or a woman. Meanwhile, back in the UK, her comments about multiculturalism and its impact on Europe have hit the headlines. Here's what the Home Secretary had to say.
Multiculturalism makes no demands of the incomer to integrate. It has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. They could be in the society, but not of the society. And in extreme cases, they could pursue lives aimed at undermining the stability and threatening the security of our society.
But as quick as night turns today, Braverman's remarks were blasted by the usual suspects, with Labour's Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper accusing her of deeply divisive, damaging political game playing. But what do you think? Is Braverman right that multiculturalism has failed? Let me know your thoughts, Mark at gbnews.com, and I'll bring you the vote of our poll on that very shortly. But to debate this now, I'm joined by the social commentators Joanna Jarju and Chris Rose, and GB News star Nana Akua. Joanna, let me start with you. Do you think that multiculturalism has failed in this country?
Absolutely not. I think that, when we have this conversation in this type of context, people usually talk about how inclusive Britain is and how open we are to other cultures. And then you've got somebody like the Home Secretary talking about how multiculturalism has failed, when really the history of this country, most of it has been built off the back of really successful multiculturalism, dating back from even when you look at things like the Windrush generation, and it's still being built off the back of multiculturalism. When you look at net migration figures, and when you look at the fact that we need people from other cultures and from other countries to come and fill the skills gap that we've got in this country. When you've got things like 100,000 vacancies in the NHS, 165,000 vacancies in social care, you need people to come. And actually, if we're saying that, we're a completely open and accepting country, then we should be able to accept other people's cultures.
We should be able to, but Chris Rose, it doesn't always happen. Unfortunately, there are ethnic tensions within our great country.
Absolutely. And I think over the last 24 hours, what I've repeatedly seen is people mix up multiracialism and multiculturalism. Like multiculturalism, you need a cohesive society where cultures come together and unite. But that isn't always the case. I mean, we've seen it in Leicester, we've seen it in Blackburn, we've seen it in Dewsbury, we've seen it in Yorkshire as well. And we've seen it in Peckham as well recently. And when cultures get to the point of a melting pot and they combust, it can turn very toxic. As we've seen, in Peckham, we had the racism towards the Asian shopkeeper recently as well. And it's just not good. I mean, an individual ethnic minority having a successful career doesn't really change the fact that we do have melting pots in certain communities. And that's why I think Suella was absolutely right. I mean, she's not the first politician to say it. We had Liberal David Cameron said it in 2011. We had Angela Merkel, who said it in 2010. It's a very reasonable point to come to that conclusion, and I fully agree with her.
Nana Akua, we've had lots of commentators pointing out ad nauseam that Suella Braverman herself, the Home Secretary, is an example of multiculturalism working. Is that a red herring?
Well, to be honest, it's the exact opposite, actually. Suella Braverman, I think what it is people keep confusing this definition of multiculturalism with having just a multicultural sort of style within the country. So multiculturalism is about separate groups coming in and keeping their individual separate identities within a whole picture. So you would have, say, a Muslim area potentially, you would have, say, a Hindu area, a potential Sikh area, you'd have a black area that could be African, then a Caribbean area. But those areas don't necessarily mix. They're just lots of cultural areas. So what it does create are little individual ghettos. So what happens when somebody from, say, the Caribbean comes, they'll go to the Caribbean section and just stick with the Caribbeans. So Suella Braverman is the exact opposite of that. Her parents, like my parents, I imagine, came to this country and assimilated to the environment. So my parents didn't bring a little bit of Ghana and only go where the Ghanaians were. They literally just did as the British did. When in Rome, do as the Romans. And that is the opposite of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is about having those little pockets of ghettos of people within their own cultural boundaries, in their own structure. And that's why she's saying it's failing. So it's a massive red herring, and it shows a huge lack of understanding of what multiculturalism actually means. And Joanna, you pointed out the Windrush. When people came in the Windrush many years ago, they literally assimilated to the British way of living. And as for needing people from other races and other parts of the world, that's not the point. The point is multiculturalism is almost like an isolationism, and that's not good, and it has failed.
Joanna, briefly, if you can, Dr. Rakib Ehsan, who is a social commentator, has said what we're seeing is the conflation between being a multiracial democracy and multiculturalism as an ideological belief, a philosophical concept, and indeed a political idea. Joanna, are you not gaslighting my viewers and listeners who feel impacted by the fact that there are racial tensions among ethnic groups in some of our cities and their lives are being affected by it?
Well, I think that the solution to some of these issues would be to tackle on some of the issues that we've got as a country dead on. And going back to what Nana said, you know, about the Windrush generation, we've just had Notting Hill Carnival. That is a perfect example of great multiculturalism. When you look at what that carnival contributed to the British economy, when you look at what different, actually, sorry, let me finish. When you look at what different cultures have also contributed, whether it comes to food, when it comes to culture, that is what's positive about multiculturalism. When it comes to the tensions, that's a completely different subject matter. But I think the difference is with this, when it comes to what Suella Braverman said, is the context in which she said it. There's a difference between talking about whether people, you know, are learning English enough at a sufficient standard, to having this conversation about security and things like that. I think it's creating a narrative of fear of the other. And I think that it's just stoking tensions for absolutely no reason.
Okay.
For more division.
The clock is against us. Last word, Nana and Chris. First of all, Nana Akua, you're shaking your head. Notting Hill Carnival, perfect example of integration.
But she's using the word multiculturalism again. Yeah, okay, that's an example of people, you know, bringing their culture into the streets of London. So that's an example of multiculturalism. Was it successful? What, with a load of people, 75 officers injured, over 300 arrests, people running around the streets of London. Sorry, I'll let you finish. Don't interrupt. I'll let you finish, yeah? I didn't interrupt you. People running around with machetes. If that is an example of wonderful multiculturalism, then hey. But I don't think so. I don't think that's the example that we should be drawing. What Suella Braverman was talking about. What Suella Braverman was talking about.
A couple of seconds from you, Joanna, and I'm going to give Chris Rose the last word. Joanna, final right to reply.
Again, it's just stoking this division even more. Were there a small amount of crime at Notting Hill Carnival? Yes, but less than main.
Okay, Chris Rose. Chris Rose. Stoking division or drawing attention to a problem in our society?
It's definitely drawing attention to a problem in our society, because when people arrive here, there needs to be more of an incentive for them to integrate. Like I say, one of the basic things is to learn the language of English. That is one of the things, but even with that, it's not always going the right way that it should be. And like you say, like Nana said, there are little ghettos, and those ghettos do cause issues. We see, you know, Birmingham is closer to me, and we've seen over the last few decades that every once in a while, those tensions do rise up, and it does release in a very toxic way.
A fascinating debate, which we had longer. My thanks to Joanna Jarju, Chris Rose, and of course, Nana Akua, who is back on Saturday. So, Friday, I should say. Who do you agree with? Is Suella Braverman right that multiculturalism has failed? Andy said on Twitter, yes, it's failed in its present form, where all other cultures are more important than British culture. Shadow said on Twitter, yes, when we talk about multiculturalism, we always favour everyone else's rather than our own. But Jammer says the daughter of Indian and Kenyan immigrants who has made it to Home Secretary under a PM of Indian heritage would suggest multiculturalism is doing OK. Well, your verdict is in. 84% agree that multiculturalism has failed. 16% say it has not. Angela Levin and Jim Davidson are still to come, plus Lee Anderson. First, the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Storm Agnes is continuing to provide some quite blustery, very strong winds. Those winds really peaking throughout this evening. Through the Irish Sea, still the potential for 65, 75 mile an hour winds along some very exposed coastal areas and over hills. So do continue to take care. It will be accompanied by some heavy pulses of rain pushing across northern England up into Scotland. Generally elsewhere across Northern Ireland, Wales, southern half of England, it will turn drier into the second half of the night, and the winds will slowly begin to ease out. But there's enough breeze around to really mix up the air, and that will prevent temperatures from dropping too much at all. So a relatively mild start to Thursday. Whilst the strongest winds will be easing tomorrow, it will still be a fairly breezy day for many of us. But once the rain across the far north clears off, a good chunk of us should see a largely dry day, still with a fair amount of cloud around, some bright intervals trying to push their way through before this rain begins to spread its way in from the west later on. Temperatures generally around 17 to 19 degrees Celsius. On Friday, we start to see this area of high pressure want to build its way in from the south. So low pressure is still clinging on in the north, and that will continue to provide some gusty winds at times for parts of Scotland, continuing to bring some showers as well. But once the rain in the far south east A good amount of England, Wales and southern half of Northern Ireland as well should see a fairly fine day with some sunny intervals in the mixture as well. Will be though relatively changeable as we head into the weekend, some showers and longer spells of rain for some of us. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, despite another U-turn from Sir Flip-Flop, Labour will slap VAT on private school fees if they gain power. So is this the start of the party's war on wealth and a move that will cripple the education system? My panel return to debate that shortly. But first, as the government approves drilling in the largest untapped North Sea oil field, is Rishi Sunak right to ignore the net zero backlash and put Britain's prosperity first? Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson is live in the studio next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Royal biographer Angela Levin coming up shortly, but it's time now for The Real World with Lee Anderson. And Thatcher donor Lord Harris has made an explosive interjection into the bitter civil war brewing in the Tory party. The Conservative peer has sensationally claimed the party does not deserve to win the next election, just weeks after he handed over £5,000 to Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor. In bombshell comments made to the Daily Telegraph, the Carpet-Right founder, who likes a deep shag, said he'd lost his faith in the party's ability to govern following a series of policy disappointments. So let's speak to Lee Anderson, the man of the moment. Can I congratulate you on the tan, by the way?
Thank you very much.
You've had a well-deserved break, but you've come back to a lot of drama in this country. First of all, your reaction to a problem there for Tory party funding.
Well, not really, Mark. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Lord Harris. He's done a lot of great work around young people and education in this great city of ours, but I think he's off the mark here. I think, we've had some really good donations over the past 6 or 7 months, the Tory party. As me personally, I get good donations. So there's business people out there, there's backers out there that would disagree with Lord Harris. And, over the past week, 2 weeks, we've seen Rishi with the net zero, row back on that. This is great news for the people of Ashfield. We've seen a superb speech by Suella just a few days ago in DC. This is getting my inbox interested again. Constituents are contacting me and saying, you know what, Lee, more of this, and you've got our vote at the next election.
What has motivated Rishi Sunak's shift to the right? Does he think these things? Is this the real Rishi, or is he just looking at polls?
I think it's always there. It's always been there for Rishi. There is certain voices within the party, in all political parties, that make noises about the net zero. I've been very vocal on net zero since day one. I agree with us trying to leave the planet in a better condition, but what I don't agree with is the cost, the unknown cost. It could run into trillions, Mark, this cost could. And the people that's going to bear the brunt of this are the poorest in society. Now, fair play to Rishi. He's recognised this and said, you know what, this is not on. Let's go for net zero. Let's get that 2050 target. But in the meantime, let's not punish the most vulnerable in society. Fair play to him.
However, will this position on net zero lose the Tories votes in London and the South East?
It's rubbish.
What's the point in this moral victory if you're in opposition benches?
I've been knocking on doors for donkey's years for both Labour and the Conservative Party, and this net zero nonsense never comes up on the doorstep once. You might get the odd Green every 10,000 doors pipe up about it. It never comes up. But when you ask the question, do you agree with trying to achieve net zero? Most people say yes. But what they don't agree with is the cost, the unknown cost.
And what about those climate scientists who say that this move by Sunak will cause temperatures to rise? Well, you're not worried about your grandkids?
I mean, look, Mark, how long's this planet been here? It's been here for millions and trillions of years. We're still here. It gets warmer, it gets colder. And you know what?
The forest fires, the droughts,
the
floods.
Look, 1% of the world's emissions come from this country. We could sink this island tomorrow. It wouldn't make a blind bit of difference.
That's crossed my mind.
It's a world problem. It needs a world solution, and Rishi's quite right.
Speaking of world solutions, what about the 5 red wall pledges? Tell me more.
Well, this is part of the New Conservatives pledges. They've got their own event at conference next week, and I'm actually speaking, I think, on Monday or Tuesday at the New Conservatives. These are like-minded Tories. These are actually, Tories that I go up and down the country each Friday night and speak to different associations, to Tory voters, to Tory members. And they all think alike. They think like me. They say the things that I'm saying.
They don't think like Rishi Sunak, do they?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I mean, some of the things that Rishi's gave us, over the past year since he's been in office, the coal mine in Cumbria. We'd have never got that before. He's rode back on net zero. He's changed he's moved the goalposts, if you like, a little bit on net zero.
Well, yeah. I mean, has the halo slipped a little bit for Boris Johnson, given the fact that he's a hero in the red wall? But of course, Boris Johnson is Mr. Net Zero and also Mr. HS2.
Yeah. Well, Boris is a hero in the red wall. He still is. Lots of people got a lot of love, but fair play to Rishi. We wouldn't have got the coal mine in Cumbria with Boris. I'm pretty sure of that. We wouldn't have got these changes over the past few weeks on net zero.
Petrol and diesel cars, boilers.
Yeah, and we wouldn't have got the Suella speech, I don't think, in the States just a few days ago. So this is, it's red meat, if you like, for my voters, and we're moving in the right direction.
Is Suella Braverman a divisive, toxic figure in this country? Does she bring shame on the country?
Listen, all politicians are divisive. If you're not divisive as a politician, then you're not doing your job properly, because, regardless of what I say, even if people agree with what I say, they will not say it publicly. Depending on what colour you wear politically, people will hate you whatever you say. Suella, Super Suella, I call her. I think she's got balls of steel. I think that speech she gave in the
I'll have
States.
to charge you for saying Balls of Steel, by the way, because that's the name of a show I used to do when I got the IP.
Did you?
Yeah. But you think she's a courageous politician?
Oh, that speech she gave was the best speech I've ever seen from one of our politicians on foreign soil for donkey's years.
But what about those commentators on the left who have said that it's, you know, outrageous what she said, sort of xenophobic
Well,
and hateful?
these so-called commentators, Mark, are probably publicly school educated, namby-pamby, you know, pearl-clutching, out of touch, Guardian reading, muesli munching. There's all sorts of adjectives you can use to these people. Out of touch. Come and knock on some doors in Ashfield, speak to some real people, and they'll tell you about Suella.
The Prime Minister watches GB News. I think he watches my show because I said that the reversal on petrol and diesel cars had to happen. 3 days later, the U-turn occurred, so well done him. If he's watching now, he probably is. What else do you want from the boss?
More of the same. I mean, we've seen the green shoots now. I know this. The Lord Harris was complaining.
Would you want tax cuts?
Well, of course I do. We're low tax Conservatives. We need to get the shackles off. We've had a terrible 2 or 3 years since I've been elected. We've had the COVID situation. We've had the war in Ukraine. I think now we're beginning to see. You know, let Rishi get the shackles off. Let him do what he wants to do. Let's get these. Get the coal mine open. That would be a great plus for me. The net zero stuff is absolutely brilliant. Get the small boats sorted out, reduce the debt, get inflation down. If he does all that, then next year the country's got a real choice to make. Is it Labour who will reverse all this stuff, or is it Rishi to carry on with more of the same?
Lee Anderson, great to see you. Look forward to the show on Friday. My thanks to GB News star and the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party. In that order, by the way, GB News first and then the Conservative Party, Lee Anderson. Let me just say that there are plenty of people out there watching and listening and beyond who think that the Tories have made a Horlicks of the country over the last 13 years and believe that it is demonstrably Labour's turn. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.com. Coming up, I'll be asking Jim Davidson if it's impossible to cancel Harry Potter author turned women's rights champion J.K. Rowling. What does Jim Davidson think of cancel culture? But first, after yet another U-turn, this time on the charitable status of private schools, is Keir Starmer now the most untrustworthy politician in the country? We debate that next.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Briefly, a big reaction on email to all of the topics tonight. Hi, Mark, says Mike. Too much multiculturalism causes problems and tensions within any society. It's a recipe for disaster. On net zero, Bill says, Mark, net zero sounds like Y2K all over again. And for your attention, says Sonia, when it comes to green energy, wind and solar, do not work without baseload power. Keep those emails coming, Mark at gbnews.com. My panel have rejoined me, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Now, in what could mark the first sinister assault in Labour's war on wealth, the party has signalled they will whack 20% VAT on all private school fees immediately if they gain power, but have tonight, here's a surprise, U-turned on their pledge to remove private schools' charitable status. Whilst Labour Party chairwoman Annalise Dodds claims the extra cash is desperately needed to improve state schools, which are attended by more than 90% of British kids, critics say it will force smaller private schools to close entirely and could cripple the already stretched state system that would be forced to absorb countless extra pupils. Christine, another U-turn from Keir Starmer.
Well, hardly a surprise, is it?
Can you explain this? Because the VAT is going to go on the fees, but not charitable status is going to be maintained. What does that mean?
Keir Starmer doesn't really know what he stands for. Here are my principles, but I've got others if you don't like them. That is where he comes from. He is now feeling the heat on him because he can see becoming Prime Minister is in the fairly near distance. And he thinks,
Exactly.
right, I've got to come up with some policies. Well, I mean, let's be honest, it is. I've got to come up with some policies, but they're not fully thought through. And he will backtrack on all sorts of things if he wants to. But this is sheer class envy. I mean, people seem to think that everybody who goes to private school, they think of Eton and Harrow and all those incredibly...
And that the parents are loaded. They're not all loaded.
The parents are loaded. They're not. And there are an enormous number of smaller private schools who are basically small businesses, and they're jams. They are just about managing. They don't make vast profits, and they give people a really good, rounded education. And those parents who give up a monumental amount... I went to a private school until I was 12, and I was expelled. And then...
You've always been naughty, haven't you?
I've always been naughty, and I...
She never says what was it?
And I still... I haven't got time to explain. Later. I was expelled, and my parents had taken the precaution of making me take the 11+, so I could then go to the local grammar school, which was fabulous, co-ed, boys and everything. It was just wonderful. But my parents gave up an enormous amount. They were not mega wealthy. They gave up an enormous amount of other things they could be doing that money to send my brother and to me. It would have been manna from heaven when I was expelled, probably, because they could save all that.
I'll have people...
But people, just to finish, people are paying twice. They're paying for the state schools, for the taxes, and then they're just like private health. They're paying twice, and what's wrong with that? People can choose to better their children if that's what they want to do with their money.
Adam, if you can afford 15, 20, 25, 30,000 pounds a year, you can afford a bit of VAT.
No, look, again, I'm going to echo what Christina said here. It isn't just the super wealthy or even the wealthy that have kids in private schools. I have 3 children in private schools. I've made that choice for many reasons. Now, every time that the invoices come in, you know, it is a big chunk of my earnings. It's my biggest outlay. Now, I've had times where I've had to put the school fees on a credit card. During COVID, I had to borrow money off of family members. But I wanted to keep that education for my children for multiple different reasons. Now, what scares me here is that if they added another 20% to the fees, I probably couldn't afford to have all 3 kids in private school. So I would probably put them back into the state system. That means that they have to be funded by the state. You know,
and where are the places coming from?
And where are those places coming from? So it's a terrible, terrible idea that Keir Starmer's doing here. And I do truly believe that there will be tens of thousands of kids then suddenly trying to find places in the state schools, and it will cost the economy money.
Matthew, it is an act of cultural barbarism to tax any academic institution. Private schools teach British kids and they go on to do great things in this country.
As do kids from the 93% of kids who've gone to state schools. It's not an act of barbarism, it's an act of fairness. When the parents of kids in state schools go and buy the kids the laptop that they need, they're paying VAT, so why shouldn't people who are sending their kids to private schools...
That's a strange argument.
Matthew, it's good news for the super rich. It won't touch the sides. But what about the poorer families who struggle to educate their kids privately? They'll be the first to drop out of the system.
Fees have gone up by an average of 7%.
Do you want to tell little Johnny that he's leaving private school and going to the comp down the road?
Well, the comp down the road is what we should be concentrating on, because 93% of British kids go to state schools. And as we know, I made a TV programme 10 years ago called Posh and Posher, why public schools run Britain. If the BBC had let me, I might have said ruin Britain, because the public school boys who've been running the country for the last 13 years have not exactly done a good job.
How much money is this going to bring in, by the way? Because the bottom line is they're going to need to build schools and they're going to need more school places.
No, because in a lot of places you've got schooling for roles, and actually particularly in the places where there are large densities of private schools. So it could actually save money. It will save money in the long run, and it'll raise over $1 billion.
Matthew's got Kia's magic calculator out again. What utter nonsense is going to save $1 billion? And just one thing. Labour MPs are hypocritical. A lot of them went to private schools.
Precisely.
And a lot of their children go to private schools. They are frauds.
Almost none.
Labour are frauds.
Pretty much none send their kids to private schools. Some did go to private schools.
Exactly the point I was going to make. Then, having been successful themselves, they want to pull up the ladder so nobody else...
Mark, did you go to private school?
I went to private school, yeah.
I'm the only kid here. I did all right.
If we're going to do full disclosure, my kids go to the local comp and it's outstanding.
Well, this is the point. If you are lucky enough to live near a really good state school,
but it's about raising standards for every kid.
I lived above a pub.
Also, can I say it's a waste of money in my case?
I lived above a pub.
Not at all. Not at all.
I mean, honestly.
Look at all of us.
I lived above a pub. I didn't live a life of luxury as a kid. And my parents, before my dad died, sent me to a private school for the last 4 years of my education. A lot of the kids that I went to junior school with in my state school ended up in prison and on drugs. You know, I think it was a great decision they made. I left at 16 and did something that I could have done without going private school. But I will always thank my parents for investing in me at that age. And I think anyone that has the money should aspire to want to do that for their children.
OK, well, look, folks, what do you think about that? Mark at gbnews.com. Lots more to come. A very busy hour coming up after the Princess of Wales sparkled as she stepped out with children at a special needs play centre. Are the royal family realising that putting Catherine front and centre is a PR masterstroke? Top royal author and dropper of rather painful truth bombs, Angela Levin, will be here with expert analysis. But next, Suella Braverman declares immigration a threat to the West. Is she right that a fear of being called racist has led Europe to a dangerous open borders policy? That is our next big debate. Plus, tomorrow's front page is coming in thick and fast. First up, here is your weather. Plus, mark at gbnews.com is the email.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Storm Agnes is continuing to provide some quite blustery, very strong winds. Those winds really peaking throughout this evening. Through the Irish Sea, still the potential for 65, 75 mile an hour winds along some very exposed coastal areas and over hills. So do continue to take care. It will be accompanied by some heavy pulses of rain pushing across northern England up into Scotland. Generally elsewhere across Northern Ireland, Wales, southern half of England, it will turn drier into the second half of the night and the winds will slowly begin to ease out. But there's enough breeze around to really mix up the air and that will prevent temperatures from dropping too much at all. So a relatively mild start to Thursday. Whilst the strongest winds will be easing tomorrow, it will still be a fairly breezy day for many of us. But once the rain across the far north clears off, a good chunk of us should see a largely dry day, still with a fair amount of cloud around, some bright intervals trying to push their way through before this rain begins to spread its way in from the west later on. Temperatures generally around 17 to 19 degrees Celsius. On Friday, we start to see this area of high pressure want to build its way in from the south. So low pressure is still clinging on in the north, and that will continue to provide some gusty winds at times for parts of Scotland, continuing to bring some showers as well. But once the rain in the far southeast does clear its way off on Friday, a good amount of England, Wales and southern half of Northern Ireland as well should see a fairly fine day with some sunny intervals in the mixture as well. Will be, though, relatively changeable as we head into the weekend, some showers and longer spells of rain for some of us. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's coming up to 10 o'clock, and this is Mark Dolan tonight. Suella Braverman's big speech in Washington was full of stark and frank warnings about the immigration threat to the West. But was she right that the fear of being called racist has led Europe to a dangerous open borders crisis?
The status quo, where people are able to travel through multiple safe countries and even reside in safe countries for years, while they pick and choose their preferred destination to claim asylum, is absurd and unsustainable.
She's a hero to some, a villain to others. What's your view? Well, that is the big debate next with my pundits, Christine Hamilton, Adam Brooks and Matthew Larzer. Also tonight, the Scottish Government finally gives the green light to the UK's first drugs consumption rooms, where addicts can shoot up, aided by the state. That's right, they're going to create state-funded shoot-up rooms. The panel debate whether the SNP is risking lives with that Liberal approach to Class A drugs, despite already having the deadliest drugs record in Europe. Meanwhile, the Princess of Wales sparkles as she steps out with children at a special needs play centre. So are the royal family realising that putting her, Catherine, front and centre is a PR winner? Top royal author, the fearless Angela Levin, gives her assessment shortly. And one of Britain's best comedians, Jim Davidson, gets stuck into new polling that puts Tory London mayoral candidate Susan Hall just 3 points away from Sadiq Khan. Is this a sign that ULEZ-style schemes are an absolute disaster for the rest of the country? Is Britain saying no to net zero? Jim is uncancelled later. Plus, I will crown tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass before the evening is out. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages. Lots to get through, a busy hour. Sparks are going to fly. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Mark, thank you. Well, tributes are pouring in tonight for a much-loved 15-year-old girl with a bright future after she was stabbed to death on her way to school this morning. Emergency services were called to Croydon in South London at about 8:30. An eyewitness describing seeing a bus driver and a passerby trying to resuscitate her. Chief Superintendent Antti Britton said a 17-year-old boy has been arrested who was known to the victim.
This is every parent's worst nightmare.
And I know the officers who responded this morning, along with our emergency service colleagues, are devastated at the victim's death. This is an emotion I share, and I know people across Croydon will be feeling the same. The victim's family has been informed, and our thoughts are with them at what must be an incredibly difficult time.
Well, in other news today, this company, GBNews, has suspended its presenter, Dan Wootton. It's after offensive comments were made by Lawrence Fox during an interview last night on this channel. He made a series of derogatory remarks about a political journalist, Ava Evans. Presenter Lawrence Fox has also been suspended with immediate effect and taken off air. In a statement, GB News called the comments totally unacceptable, adding they did not reflect the company's values. GB News has issued a formal apology to Miss Evans and launched a full investigation. The UK's largest untapped oil and gas field, Rosebank in Scotland, has been approved for development. That's despite a row over climate concerns. Regulators say net zero considerations were taken into account, but Scotland's First Minister Humza Yousaf says he's disappointed the project's been given the go-ahead. The UK government, however, has welcomed the decision, saying it'll generate billions for the economy. The United Nations has rejected the Home Secretary's calls for international law on refugees to be changed. In a speech in Washington yesterday, Suella Braverman suggested the UN 1951 Refugee Convention needed updating. She was arguing that fearing discrimination for being gay or being a woman shouldn't be enough to qualify for international refugee protection. Now, as you've been hearing, the UK's first drug consumption room, where users can take illegal drugs under medical supervision, has been approved. The facility, planned for Glasgow's East End, is backed by the Scottish Government as a way to tackle the country's drugs deaths crisis. The £2.3 million pilot will allow users to take their own illegal drugs, but in a hygienic environment with medical staff on standby for support. Now, if the rain is rattling at your window, yellow weather warnings are in place for most of the UK tonight, and forecasters are warning the worst is yet to come. Storm Agnes, the first of the season, is set to make landfall in the UK after already battering the south of Ireland with gale-force winds earlier, causing damage to buildings, trees coming down and power outages, as well as significant travel disruption. The Met Office has warned Storm Agnes may also lead to an increased risk of flooding in vulnerable or low-lying areas. Strong and disruptive winds are expected to last until tomorrow morning, with the storm at its worst tonight. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
My thanks to Polly Middlehurst, who returns in an hour's time. Tomorrow's news tonight in our media buzz. Let's kick off with a first look at tomorrow's front pages. And here we go, a shocking story. Girl 15 killed for dumping boy. We've heard about this story in the bulletin from Polly just now. Machete revenge on bus to school. Police are questioning a teenage boy after a 15-year-old schoolgirl was stabbed to death with a machete on her bus trip on her way to school. Witnesses said the attack happened after a row on a double-decker in Croydon in South London when the girl refused roses from this individual a day after they split up. A truly horrifying stories, and if we're honest, there are just no words. Now, my superstar panel are back with me for what's going to be a very lively hour. Author and broadcaster, force of nature no less, Christine Hamilton. Prize fighter, businessman and activist. He's got more belts than Pierre Cardin, Adam Brooks. One of my favourite people, former Labour Party advisor, Matthew Larser. If only he was advising Keir Starmer now. Never say never.
He will be.
He will be.
He will be.
Give it a few months. Now, Suella Braverman's hardline speech in Washington delivered a stark warning that, quote, immigration is an existential threat to the West's way of life. The Home Secretary said Europe was now at a critical juncture and failure to find a way to meet the challenge of illegal migration would create the conditions for more extreme politics.
Multiculturalism makes no demands of the incomer to integrate. It has failed because it allowed people to come to our society and live parallel lives in it. They could be in the society, but not of the society. And in extreme cases, they could pursue lives aimed at undermining the stability and threatening the security of our society.
So, Matthew, do you think that Europe has been asleep at the wheel in regards to mass immigration? Because it's not just a UK problem, is it?
No, absolutely. It's not just a UK problem, but I don't think that Europe's been asleep at the wheel at all. I think it's got some things wrong, but I think that it's fully aware. Look, one of my previous jobs was bringing together political leaders from across Europe, from progressive parties, and I can tell you that, immigration is as big a political issue in pretty much every other European country as it is here in Britain.
Hence the rise of the right in Germany, Italy and beyond.
Yeah, it has certainly been an impact, but it's even impacted on the right, say in Germany, when Angela Merkel's decision to allow in over 1 million people from Syria at the time of the Syrian crisis in 2015 had a big impact. So look, I think Europe has made some mistakes, but we need to cooperate with Europe because people who...
What does that mean?
Well, it means we need to one of Labour's key policies is to have this cross-border police unit.
Let the EU sort it out.
Not do a deal and let the EU sort it out.
100,000 a year?
But no, and that wasn't... it's so complicated, and Keir got the messaging wrong.
Where's the surprise?
Doesn't know. Most of the time he's on it, but on this, they got their lines confused and people got the wrong impression. But, for example, just this very week, the EU has done a deal with Tunisia, which is one of the countries from which people launch themselves into Europe and eventually then launch themselves across the Channel to provide extra support in Tunisia. I mean, we've just seen a horrific earthquake in Morocco. We've seen the terrible events in Libya. These are going to create flows. These are, in many ways, desperate people. Clearly, not everybody from North Africa can end up in Europe, so therefore we need a sensible approach, including giving more support in-country.
Well, there's the issue, Christine. Even ultra-woke Emmanuel Macron said this week in a television interview in regard to France, we cannot accept the misery of the world. There are probably billions of people who could have a better life in the West. It's not going to work.
Of course there are, and there always have been billions of people, but now they know about what's going on in the West, thanks to social media and the internet, etc. The whole world has become...
And crooked people smugglers.
...has become much smaller. What concerns me, obviously, the numbers. I mean, by the way, bravo, Suella. I mean, I thought what she did was brilliant, and her speech in New York, good for her.
What do you say to those who think that it was dog whistle politics?
Well, it's about time. It's nothing to do with dog whistle politics. She was standing up for what she believes in and what a whole load of other people believe in. That enough is enough, but it isn't.
Standing up for the majority.
Yeah, it isn't just...
If she wanted serious reform, it was the United Nations General Assembly over the last week. We sent Oliver Dowden, who talked about artificial intelligence. She went to the enemy camp as far as the US administration is concerned, a right-wing think tank, to deliver the speech. It was all about dog whistle for her chances of being Tory leader. She wanted to show some leg to the Tory party about it.
Well, listen,
show some leg? That sounds a bit sexist.
That's very sexist to say that she wants
it's not.
to
I just say
that would never happen on this channel.
Skirts. Adam, don't be so binary.
Whether it was dog whistle politics or not, she wanted to set out her stall and she did it. What worries me as much as the sheer numbers, which we all know the problems of the numbers, but it's the cultural appropriation, the creeping cultural appropriation. I mean, for example, in 1961, we had 1% of this population were Muslim, 50,000 people. By 2021, it's 6.5%. It is going up.
Why is that a bad thing?
They are not, because they are not necessarily assimilating. Suella Braverman...
Many Muslims do, though.
Many do, but Suella Braverman is a wonderful example of somebody who has completely adopted the cultural norms of this country. An awful lot don't, and they live in, crowded areas. Tower Hamlets has 40% Muslim population, and they are not interested, a lot of them, in our culture and our way of life.
But what about the
British pub, which Adam represents, will soon be, overrun, and we have people there. Some of them are now wanting Sharia law. They're wanting to have Sharia law in their own communities.
I had a good pint in Tower Hamlets just a few days ago. Pride of Spitalfields, one of the great old boozers of London, in Tower Hamlets. People, I mean, look, we need to be...
My pub is full of people of all faiths and
absolutely.
all colours. I would encourage that, and I'm pleased that my pub is so welcoming to so many different societies.
I'm not unwelcoming. They must assimilate.
That we suddenly have areas within our country where you know, they don't want to mix. And that is a great point.
And that can be that can be many different ethnic groups.
Yes,
and we're now seeing, and we've heard this from Rakib Ehsan, who's a social commentator, who has said that you've got ethnic groups who are actually attacking each other, and it's not about necessarily the indigenous.
Well, we saw the issue in Peckham recently, which is a good example of that.
So therefore, it is actually not even relevant to perhaps indigenous white people living in the UK, but actually it's among different groups of an ethnic nature.
The main thing, though, Mark, is that, you know, if I speak about illegal immigration online or on here, immediately I will get tweets or messages saying that I'm racist. Now,
it's nothing to do
you know,
with racism.
to want to have controlled borders in this country is a very conservative way of thinking, and we haven't had that for a long time.
Well, in the good old days, we all believed in borders, left and right.
And Labour does. Labour's the only party that will stop the boat.
This is where the left have gone mad, is that they believe in an open borders policy.
I personally think that Suella's speech was one of the best speeches that I've heard in a very long time. I think it was quite prime ministerial. I'd actually prefer her to be the Prime Minister than Rishi Sunak.
You tweeted that today, didn't you?
I did tweet that. And look, we've got to remember, we haven't got any housing for these people coming across, who are, the majority are economic migrants. They're coming here for a better life. Fair play to them, but our system allows that. We take 75% of the asylum claims, we process them. In Europe, it's 15 or 20%.
Absolutely.
Because we have got lefty civil servants, lefty lawyers, lefty courts, all encouraging this, you know, and lefty charities, telling them what to say, telling them to say they're gay, telling them to say they've persecuted. Half of them are not even from the countries they say they're from.
I think, Mark, the point you made is really interesting about when you use the word lefty. Lefty doesn't equal the Labour Party. Some people in sort of left liberal commentators may believe in an open borders policy. The Labour Party certainly doesn't. It believes in controlled migration. I've still got the mug from the campaign that I worked on in 2015, which says Labour controlled immigration. We've not had the chance to do that, but Labour will stop the small boats crisis. And anybody who thinks that Labour will have an open borders policy is just simply wrong.
There is absolutely nothing racist in wanting to control other people taking over your country. It's nothing to do with
and a lot, I would say other people coming to a country.
We can't house our own people. We can't educate our own people.
We may use different language, but we're agreeing on the same thing, which is we must have controlled borders.
A lot of the noise... A lot of the noise comes from these champagne socialist celebrities that try and paint everyone as racist.
And they've never delivered a Labour leaflet.
Will anybody believe, briefly, will anyone believe that Labour are going to be tough on borders when it was Tony Blair, whilst in power, who opened the floodgates to Eastern Europe, a move he didn't even need to make, but he was trying to become President of Europe?
Well, you say that, but of course, let's remind, since Brexit, net migration has gone up. And this is not illegal immigration. Net illegal migration has gone up since Brexit. We've had 13 years of a Tory government. We've got 160,000 people waiting for their claims to be assessed, and we're paying £8 million a day to keep people in hotels, which is having impacts on communities, I think we'll all agree, across the country. OK, well, listen, Christine, final thought.
If we go to somebody else's country, we respect their laws, and we went to live there, we would expect to assimilate into that country. All I ask is that people who come here do the same and respect our culture.
All this talk of losing control of our borders, what about losing control of drug policy? Britain is to introduce its first shoot-up rooms. That's right, forget about bring your own beer, bring your own drugs. This is happening, of course, courtesy of the SNP up in Scotland. We'll debate that with my brilliant panel shortly. But next, the Princess of Wales is playing an increasingly key role in the royal family, not least today, making a solo appearance at a children's day centre. Top royal author Angela Levin answers whether the firm is right to use Kate as their star woman to secure the monarchy's future. She's next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political budgets.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Comedy legend Jim Davidson is waiting in the wings, but first it's time for esteemed royal journalist and biographer Angela Levin. And the Princess of Wales charmed special needs toddlers and their parents during a polished public performance in Kent earlier today. Flying solo, Princess Kate joined a sensory session at the Orchards Centre in the first of a series of engagements supporting her Shaping Us campaign, highlighting the importance of childhood experiences for the under-5s. And with other recent engagements, including yesterday's trip to Leeds, proving a roaring success for the princess despite having no prince by her side, it looks like the royal family are realising that putting Kate front and centre is the best PR they could wish for. Angela, great to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
She's the real deal, Kate, isn't she? She's got the X Factor.
Well, she is the real deal. And I think she's had the real deal for a long time because she took it carefully, she studied. It was 10 years before she actually got involved with children, little children, to get it right. You know, she's studied very carefully and she's now got loads of confidence. She's got 3 children, she's a mother, she's got all the things that she wanted, she's got the right husband, and she now has enough confidence to go off on her own. Doesn't mean that he's going one place and she's going another because they'd rather have a bit of a gap. It's just that King Charles has cut down the number of senior royals they are. You know, we've lost Harry and Meghan, we've lost Prince Andrew.
What happened to Harry and Meghan? Oh, yeah, that's another story.
I'll tell you later, if you've got time. And they, you know, they've got to spread things, so it's much better if people do divide and go off and do what they really want to do.
And what we've discovered this week is that she's got as much pulling power on her own as with hubby.
Yes. And that's because she's an entertaining person. When you saw her when she was getting some sort of weather thing over her and she had to blow it up, she was hysterically giggling.
I remember that.
She thought it was really funny. So she's very relaxed now. She knows what she's doing. She walks with enormous dignity. She always looks nice. What's interesting is that she's changed her clothes from wearing dresses and things like that, which the Queen liked, and she wears trouser suits. And she looks great, as if she's really going to do a lot of business there. And, of course, she loves the children and they respond to her. They absolutely adore her.
Is she the new Diana, the new Elizabeth?
No, I don't think she's a new anything. She's Catherine, who's matured and now feels very confident.
Unlike poor old Meghan, because Meghan was in the job for 5 minutes and thought, this is pretty boring, opening hospitals all the time and receiving bouquets. Kate seems to actually enjoy being the Princess of Wales.
Yes, what she really likes to do is to help others, and she wants to do something to make a mark. And if you deal with children at a very early age, you can help them recover a little bit of what they've got and get, you know, a lot of help before they start going to school. That's where you need to. If there's just a single mother who's very young, you know, she can help and do that. And I think that's what she really wants to do. She doesn't want to do silly things, cutting rope and ribbon, not rope, is it? Or cutting ribbon and doing odd jobs. You know, she wants to do something that is really valuable. Her husband is doing it, now she's doing it, and we couldn't expect much more.
Briefly, I mean, she's been in public life now for over a decade.
Yes.
I cannot think of a single foot that she's put wrong.
No, she doesn't. She doesn't do that because she's cautious, she's careful. And actually, she's very optimistic and positive. She's smiling, she's enjoying things. She's not looking around and seeing what someone else has got that she hasn't.
Well, that takes us to Meghan. Kelly Osbourne, remember her? She's the daughter of Sharon and Ozzy Osbourne. She's poured a bucket of the brown stuff over Prince Harry in a special podcast called The Osbournes. Take a listen.
Called Harry a
Yeah, I just think he's such a whinger.
Yeah. Ooh, what's that mean? Like when you whinge, like a
Whine. And the thing is, and maybe it's because I feel a certain level of disappointment in the sense where I feel like they had an opportunity to become the most liked, loved people in the entire world that could actually bring some positive change, but they went down this like victim road instead. Like I get wanting to leave
the royal family.
I get that. But then...
Well, the big story there is Kelly's purple hair, which I quite like. Can I ask you your reaction to that? It demonstrates to me that Harry, in particular, is losing his fan base in the United States.
Well, I think people can see through both of them now, actually, and can see where they told lots of lies and can see this terrible moaning, endless moaning. Now, if you look at the country or in America and you look here, it's very hard for people. You know, money is difficult, you know, gas prices are high, and they don't moan. And if you've got a beautiful house with 16 bathrooms and the sea is very near you, 2 young children, and you're still moaning. I mean, to have 6 hours on Netflix, which was really one long moan. I'm sure you didn't see it. I actually pushed myself
I sat
through it.
Through most of it.
You did. And it's ridiculous. And they were so
I took up smoking halfway through, and then by the end, the hard stuff.
I ate non-stop. Comfort eating. But I think that you can't actually continue to do that without any gratitude. There was no gratitude. Meghan wouldn't be known for anything if she hadn't actually married Harry and been in the royal family. But she, you know, her wedding was £132 million, no gratitude. And the whole thing was to destroy them and to, you know, get rid of them so they could come and present a more woke, upward market couple. But they made a big mistake.
They would argue that they were hounded out of this country. The press were very hostile. You and I are both being very hostile now. You know, you could argue the press attention has made their life a misery. They're entitled to complain, and that actually it's affected their mental health.
No, that's nonsense. They wanted to leave. The Queen said you can go. You know, they had everything they wanted. If you've got, you move on. You know,
what about the Invictus Games? I mean, that's pretty impressive, wasn't it? Surely that's a high point for the couple.
That was shocking. I thought it was terrible how Meghan turned it round to be all about her, you know, apologising that she was late because she had to make her children milkshakes. What? You know, that she was... that she stood and walked in front of cyclists who were in a race. I mean, what does she know about the military? Nothing. It wasn't about her. And it was shocking, actually, how she tried to take over. Wherever she could, she was smiling, but not... I mean, she was with a boy in a wheelchair, and she just got behind him, had a photograph taken and went off. She didn't even say hello to him. Catherine would never do that, ever.
Well, to be fair to Meghan, she did get a rapturous reception when she went to Germany, but of course this show's all about opinions. You're entitled to yours, Angela Levin. Thank you so
very
much.
much.
And I've got no doubt you'll be returning in the days to come.
Hope so.
Dropping some more of those royal truth bombs. Brilliant stuff. Thank you, Angela Levin. One of Britain's best comedians, Jim Davidson, bona fide legend, is on standby. And let me tell you, he's firing on all cylinders. First, here's the weather.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Storm Agnes is continuing to provide some quite blustery, very strong winds. Those winds really peaking throughout this evening. Through the Irish Sea, still the potential for 65, 75 mile an hour winds along some very exposed coastal areas and over hills. So do continue to take care. It will be accompanied by some heavy pulses of rain pushing across northern England up into Scotland. Generally elsewhere across Northern Ireland, Wales, southern half of England, it will turn drier into the second half of the night. The winds will slowly begin to ease out, but there's enough breeze around to really mix up the air, and that will prevent temperatures from dropping too much at all. So a relatively mild start to Thursday. Whilst the strongest winds will be easing tomorrow, it will still be a fairly breezy day for many of us. But once the rain across the far north clears off, a good chunk of us should see a largely dry day, still with a fair amount of cloud around, some bright intervals trying to push their way through before this rain begins to spread its way in from the west later on. Temperatures generally around 17 to 19 degrees Celsius. On Friday, we start to see this area of high pressure want to build its way in from the south. So low pressure is still clinging on in the north, and that will continue to provide some gusty winds at times for parts of Scotland, continuing to bring some showers as well. But once the rain in the far southeast does clear its way off on Friday, a good amount of England, Wales and southern half of Northern Ireland as well should see a fairly fine day with some sunny intervals in the mixture as well. Will be, though, relatively changeable as we head into the weekend. Some showers and longer spells of rain for some of us. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up in Uncancelled, Tory London mayoral candidate Susan Hall is now just 3 points behind Sadiq Khan in the polls. So is this proof that his hated ULEZ scheme will also prove a disaster for the country? Listen, I've got another big story for you. J.K. Rowling, she's a billionaire, OK? She's sold more books than God. Can she be cancelled? We'll be asking the fearless Jim Davidson. Also, folks, in the media buzz, Scotland gives the go-ahead to so-called drug consumption rooms where addicts can inject in comfort and safety. But is the SNP risking lives with this approach? What do you think about this happening in a neighbourhood near you? This could be rolled out across the whole of Britain. Shoot-up rooms. What's next? Bring your own beer, bring your own heroin. Welcome to lawless anarchy Britain. My panel will react to all of that. But Jim Davidson's next, and he's firing.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK. Here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight. In our media buzz, more front pages have been delivered. And let's have a look at this. We've got the Mirror, and they lead with knife crime epidemic. A 15-year-old girl killed on her way to school. Every parent's nightmare, the headline. The Daily Mail, stabbed to death in her uniform on the way to school. 15-year-old pupil at private school knifed in the neck as she stepped in to protect her friend. Then police arrest a boy aged 17. What is happening to this country? When are we going to have a zero tolerance to crime, a zero tolerance to knives, a zero tolerance to other weapons, to antisocial behaviour, to shoplifting, to burglary? What is happening to this country? More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's panel. I'm delighted to welcome author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and former Labour Party advisor Matthew Larser. Now, Britain's first drug consumption room, you heard me right, has been given the green light by authorities in Glasgow. The facility, which is backed by the Scottish Government, of course it is, will allow users to inject illegal drugs like cocaine and heroin under the supervision of trained health professionals. The SNP views it as a way to help tackle the country's drugs death crisis, for which they rank the worst in Europe. So, Christine, are lives being risked with this approach?
Well, I find this whole drug thing very, very difficult. Half of me thinks that we should legalise drugs, the other half thinks that we shouldn't. And I was talking earlier on a previous programme. There was the...
A lesser programme?
A previous programme.
You're so diplomatic.
Previous programme. There was a young man,
aren't we all?
A young man called Ant, who came on and he works with drug-dependent people in Scotland, and he was talking about this new facility that's being opened in Glasgow, and he was telling me the absolutely horrific statistics, and I said, why would you create a facility for people to go and do this? Why wouldn't they prefer to, if they're going to shoot heroin or whatever, why wouldn't they prefer to do it in the comfort of their own home? He said they don't have homes. They are on the street. If they're on the street, they do this, they discard the needles. Goodness knows what happens. In this way, you also have a chance of they come into the centre, they are there's somebody there who can talk to them. There's somebody there to look after them when they've done it. And he said there is just a chance that some of them may be brought back from the brink. Now, I mean, Scotland has the most unbelievable rates of drug dependency. I mean, it's incredible. It's vastly higher than the UK. They've got to do something. And if this is a way of controlling it... But, I mean, half of me, you know, I say legalise soft drugs, and then people shout back and they say, no, because that's the gateway to hard drugs. I don't know enough about it to know, to be honest, but I was impressed by what this chap said about the way this would control some of the people at the absolute bottom of the social heap and would save them from doing this just on the streets at risk. I mean, as he said, a lot of people, you're living in a tower block or in a very poor area, and he said their children go out to play and there are needles strung out all over the place. Now, you know, that's not good.
I just wonder, though, Adam, whether this crosses a line. The state is basically aiding and abetting drug use.
I don't like it. I really don't. It doesn't sit right with me that you've got people sort of jacking up drugs in front of people in a room. I almost feel like that could be a safety net for some people and encourage them to go there and use drugs. I mean, it really, for me, it doesn't sit right. And I couldn't hate drugs anymore.
No.
You know, I've been around drugs because I've had nightclubs and pubs and bars all my life.
Have you seen their impact?
I've seen the impact and how it changes people's behaviour. I've lost friends that I don't want anything to do with because they were on drugs and they become very, very nasty people. My dad was actually murdered by drug dealers. I couldn't hate drugs anymore. So, you know, for me, it's like the legalisation route. I think something like that would encourage addicts, and it would kill a lot of addicts if they did legalise it. It doesn't sit right. It really doesn't.
Some drug outreach workers came to my son's school a few months ago, and they are obviously... They're at the coalface in terms of young people getting involved in drugs and taking marijuana. They were against any kind of legalisation. Isn't that what this is?
No, I mean, I think, as Christine says, legalisation is, you know, it's a tough debate, and there's evidence in Portugal there's been effective legalisation.
Yeah, I think Portugal's been a mixed bag, hasn't it?
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say, yes, that it's, you know, it's not all a one-way street, but it's a debate that we should have. And I think one of the problems with drugs policy is that politicians won't discuss it because it's too much of a political hot potato.
Too difficult.
Because it's too difficult. It's kicked into that, it's put in that too difficult to draw. On this very specific issue, I agree with Christine and the testimony that we heard earlier on Jacob's show. You know, in terms of Scotland, it is just so tragic that Scotland has a particular problem with heroin. It's had it historically. You know, I mean, as we saw in the film Trainspotting, one of the iconic films about Scotland the last 20 years. In the rest of the UK and indeed the rest of the world, heroin use has massively plummeted. In Scotland, it remains a really big issue. Heroin is basically injected. Most people inject it, and therefore you have the consequences which we see. So, I mean, it's not. It's, as Adam says, it's uncomfortable. Nobody feels good about it, but I think it's for the desperate people. It may be the best solution.
Let's remember why a lot of people take drugs. From what I see, looking in, is that drugs, you escape reality. Now, life is only going to get harder. It's getting harder. Bills, you know, the way the world's going, it's getting hard. There's going to be more drug users going forward, and I think things like this are just going to encourage people to experiment with harder drugs.
Honestly, I don't think they're going into what's a kind of medicalised environment to do it. And they've done it in Switzerland, and where they oddly Switzerland and Scotland are the two places with the biggest heroin problems in Europe. And they've
as I understand it, the people who are going to go to this, was it called a shoot-up room? The people who are going to go there.
Safe consumption is the posh way of saying it.
Safe consumption are not the people who think, oh, let's have a go at heroin, I'll do it there.
Yeah.
They are the people who are already completely hooked. They're going to be encouraged to go there by social workers, etc. You know, it is such a difficult...
And as you said, Christine, it's to give people support and give them a pathway out. And I think that's key. I mean, obviously, not everybody's going to take that. Of course, nobody would be naive to say that. But as you say, at least gives that opportunity and that potential.
Scotland's got to do something.
They're breaking the law.
Well, it's in Scotland. The most senior law officer in Scotland has basically said that they can do it. And apart from the Tories, there's a cross-party consensus in Scotland. Look, Scottish politics is brutal. There isn't consensus on much, but because it's such a problem in central Scotland, this heroin problem, something's got to give, and it's a trial, and if it's a trial, and it must be assessed properly.
I was just going to say, I think that living, you know, a million miles away from that sort of situation, it is difficult to understand quite how bad it is on the ground. And give it a go, see what happens.
Well, I tell you what, Mike on email is not pulling his punches. Drug palaces today. Will it be paedophile centres tomorrow?
Oh, no, that's absurd.
There you go, strong words from Mike, but
That's
the show
absurd.
is all about opinions. Mike, a different Mike, says, Mark, allowing Scotland to have their own drugs policy is like letting Norfolk open up a drugs room in their county. It's ridiculous that Scotland can have their own rules on Britain's health policy. How did that happen?
Doesn't have a separate legal system. It's always had a separate legal system.
Health is devolved, that's why.
Fascinating stuff. Listen, there you go. Do keep those emails coming, mark@gbnews.com. Coming up, he's got a history of blackface, COVID authoritarianism and demanding people use the word people-kind rather than mankind. But can you guess what Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has done now to earn himself a nomination in tonight's Greatest Britain Union Jackass? Find out when I crown tonight's winner shortly. But next, in Uncancelled, one of Britain's best comedians, Jim Davidson, reacts to Tory London mayoral candidate Susan Hall trailing Sadiq Khan by just 3 points. So is London's failed mayor about to be toppled? And is it because of his hated ULEZ scheme? Also, Harry Potter and a Lib Dem coalition of chaos are in Jim's sights. He's firing and he's next. Jim Davidson, see you in 2.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. It is time for Uncancelled, where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And Harry Potter-themed panel at Comic-Con has been cancelled after the LGBT charity Switchboard intervened over J.K. Rowling's trans views, with a spokesman saying, "We felt compelled to express our concerns about the potential impact on our community, particularly trans individuals." But the cancellation of Rowling herself continues to falter as thousands of Amazon readers hailed the opening line of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone as one of the greatest ever. Here is the line that came in 5th place. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. Well, listen, let's drop a few truth bombs now in the company of Britain's best entertainer, legend of comedy and TV. I won't say I grew up watching you, because that will make you feel a bit old and you're far too
You grew
young.
up a lot, you know. I mean, I didn't realise you were so tall. I've only seen you like this in 16 by 9.
That's exactly.
You must sleep in a grow bag, dear boy.
I do a bit. Let me tell you, it's snowing up here.
Is it really?
Yeah. Jim, so good to see you in the studio. Listen,
Yes, thank
J.K.
you.
Rowling's a billionaire. Her great crime is that she knows the difference between a biological man and a biological woman. She can't be cancelled, can she?
Well, I think everyone can be cancelled now. It's just an accusation. I think you can, if you don't like what that person says or what that person thinks, you could be cancelled.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, that's it. But she's gone. Can't know what you mean. She's worth an absolute fortune, and actually, the public are voting with their feet. They're buying her books.
Yeah.
And they're watching her movies.
I have to tell you, not me. I always thought it was a kid's book. First of all, it was that big, wasn't it? It's only good for removing ganglions. and of course, I never really got into that because, but why? Why have a go at her? Because she's successful. So the whole trans lobby can have a go at her and think, oh, that's okay. She's rich and successful. She needs it anyway. It's absolutely ridiculous. Where's it going to end?
Where do you think this so-called trans ideology is going? The idea that, you know, men are women and that you've got biological males who identify as female, participating in female sport, breaking records. Where's it going to go, Jim? Because you've seen a few things in your lifetime.
Well, I have seen a few things. In fact, I was in Thailand once and I saw a few things I didn't think were going to be there. But there you go. There's the old joke, isn't there? 6 matching balls. But if you look now, I mean, bouncing on to another story that's bubbling around, that the Labour Party and the Lib Dems are saying they're going to form a coalition, one of them things. So the Labour Party, the person, one of their spokesmen, couldn't tell you what a woman is, and another person would say it's OK for a woman to have a penis.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
There's a campaign.
Well, I haven't had mine for a while, I have to be honest.
Well, you can show me later. Listen, Jim...
No, you'd have to get it with one. You remember the old granddad used to pick them winkles out like that with a little thing? You know, like winkles? They were seafood, like bogies in crash helmets. They used to dig in and get it. That's me. I'm old now. It's all gone.
I got the idea.
It's all gone. I'm countersunk, love.
I think we might have entered the realms of too much information here.
Maybe.
I also think you protest too much, but that's another story. Can we talk about an issue which affects all of my viewers and listeners, but which is, at the moment, the focus is London, but I think it's across Britain, which is the war on motorists.
Yeah.
So you've got these ULEZ cameras.
Yes.
And the Tories held on to Uxbridge because of their hatred of this new authoritarianism. Do you think that Mayor Khan could be chucked out of London?
Well, I hope he is chucked out of London because I don't think he's very good. I mean, all he wants to do is just... I don't know what ideology he has, but, you know, there was someone murdered yesterday, I think that today, I'm not sure, it was in the last 24 on a bus with a knife. Again, why doesn't he sort that out rather than playing political games? And actually using this ULEZ camera just to make money. It's just to make money and to punish the poor. Rich people don't care because they've got nice cars.
Do you see this as a whole UK story, that the public at the next election all around the country are going to push back on some of the zero...
I think they are, mate. I mean, what's it, Sue Hall is going to stand against? Is it Sue Hall? Is that her name? She's standing against him. She's 3 points behind him. And I think she has half a chance. She has half a chance. And she said she's going to turn around this ULEZ. Now, she says she would. Will she do it? That's the thing. Will she turn it round?
What do you think is going to happen at the next election, by the way? Because it's either going to be May or October, most likely. Do you think the Tories are gone now?
Well, first of all, I don't like the name Tories. I always find that a bit of a sort of almost a racial slur, isn't it? Yeah, it's a negative. You Tory boy.
Yeah.
You know.
Conservatives.
I think unless they get themselves together, unless they get a grip of their civil servants, unless they listen to the public, they are going to get it up the, the
proverbial.
Yeah, up the proverbial. Yes, they are. And so they need to do something. They need to listen to what the public are saying. They represent us. I mean, Rishi's a nice enough bloke, but he needs to get in there and for one moment, not worry about what the opposition are going to say and what his civil servants are going to say. Get out there and do it for us.
Has he
Go and score a century.
You are really like one of the country's most accomplished performers. Has he got the front? Has he got the X factor to actually win votes? Because he's no Boris Johnson, is he, Rishi Sunak?
No.
Can he pull something out of the hat?
You can speak. I can speak. You can sell stuff. You can sell jokes that are not funny.
I can sell this rubbish.
I know. But have you ever got a joke wrong on stage? Have you ever got a routine wrong and people still laugh? It's the way you sell it.
Yes,
and you say to these people, come with me. I will take you. Let me hold your hand and we'll get something better for our country. There's a lot going on in our country at the moment. It's very, very difficult. But Mayor Khan, he's got to go. Rishi's got to grow a pair and then we'll get our country back.
Jim, let's have a drink after the show.
Sadiq Khan said on ULEZ, I've continued to listen to Londoners' concerns in recent months. Every single Londoner with a non-ULEZ compliant vehicle is now eligible for financial support. Expanding ULEZ was a difficult decision, but it's the right one to save lives. There you go, folks. All about opinions. Let's now reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Yes, indeed, folks. Let us now have a look at my brilliant pundits and their nomination for Greatest Britain, first of all. Christine, Suella Braverman, why?
It is, well, need I explain why it's Suella Braverman? Last, somebody has had the cojones to stand up for what is right, to call a halt on immigration, etc., etc. Good for Suella Braverman. OK, she may be making a pitch for the leadership, but why not? All MPs one day hope to be Prime Minister. This is her moment. Go for it. So Suella Braverman, Greatest Britain, at last somebody is making a real stand.
Christina, 11 seconds on this. Do you think she'll be the next leader of the Tory party if Sunak loses the election?
She could well be.
Okay.
Who knows? She could well be.
Adam, briefly, if you can,
I'm holding my nose. I'm going Rishi Sunak for ignoring the climate alarmists and eco-terrorists and allowing new drilling in the North Sea.
Drill, baby, drill. How about you, Matthew?
Yeah, mine is Carpet King, Lord Harris of Peckham, who supported the Tories for years, but today had the courage to say what all of us know, the Tories don't deserve to win the next election.
What a deep pile. OK. Christine, I've run out of carpet puns now. A few of them a bit close to the knuckle, if I'm honest. Who is your Union Jackass of the day?
Oh, I see. I thought we were going to crown the Britain first. My Union Jackass is British Telecom. I know we're running out of time, but for two reasons. First of all, they have reneged on their pledge to allow the over-70s to keep landlines, and they're going to say everybody's got to go digital. Secondly, they have axed thousands of jobs in rural areas so that the Chief Executive can get her bonus for inclusion and diversity, and they're moving the jobs to towns where it's easier to get your
involves excluding
and
people,
diversity points.
Excluding people who live in the country.
Exactly.
How about you, Adam, briefly?
Mine is the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for being the biggest black-facing, bank account shutting, Nazi-clapping hypocrite there is in the world. He is an awful fraud of a man.
You're going to have to get off that fence, and you've lost that gig in Canada. How about you, Matthew?
I'll show you the pictures of me and Justin in a selection of jazzy jackets another time. Mine is Iceland boss Richard Walker, who's made a true jackass of himself. A couple of weeks ago, he said that 3 of his staff had got HIV from shoplifters with needles. Nobody this century in Britain has got HIV that way, and it's added to, it's given stigma. I mean, I felt what a throwback to the 80s to people living with HIV, really out of order. He has apologised today, to be fair to him, but what a fool he made of himself in the process.
Well, look, I'm going to nominate BT as the winner of Union Jackass for their ridiculous policies. Thank you to Christine, Adam and Matthew. Really enjoyed your company. Thank you to the team as well. It's been a very challenging 24 hours, and thank you for your company. I'm back tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and Mark Dolan tonight all weekend, of course, Friday through to Sunday. So we'll see you tomorrow at 9. Headliners is next. Here is the weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. Storm Agnes is continuing to provide some quite blustery, very strong winds. Those winds really peaking throughout this evening. Through the Irish Sea, still the potential for 65, 75 mile an hour winds along some very exposed coastal areas and over hills. So do continue to take care. It will be accompanied by some heavy pulses of rain pushing across northern England up into Scotland. Generally elsewhere across Northern Ireland, Wales, southern half of England, it will turn drier into the second half of the night, and the winds will slowly begin to ease out. But there's enough breeze around to really mix up the air, and that will prevent temperatures from dropping too much at all. So a relatively mild start to Thursday. Whilst the strongest winds will be easing tomorrow, it will still be a fairly breezy day for many of us. But once the rain across the far north clears off, a good chunk of us should see a largely dry day, still with a fair amount of cloud around, some bright intervals trying to push their way through before this rain begins to spread its way in from the west later on. Temperatures generally around 17 to 19 degrees Celsius. On Friday, we start to see this area of high pressure want to build its way in from the south. So low pressure is still clinging on in the north, and that will continue to provide some gusty winds at times for parts of Scotland, continuing to bring some showers as well. But once the rain in the far southeast does clear its way off on Friday, a good amount of England, Wales and southern half of Northern Ireland as well should see a fairly fine day with some sunny intervals in the mixture as well. Will be, though, relatively changeable as we head into the weekend. Some showers and longer spells of rain for some of us. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar. proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.